As Laura said, I'm Jen Cassiopo. I am the Professional Development Specialist with the Midwest School Age Family and Community Engagement Center, which is a contract through the New York State Education Department. Keep in mind, Midwest is the Midwest portion of New York State. I know that can get confusing, but let me tell you what the School Age Family and Community Engagement Center does. So we promote meaningful family involvement within the educational system. We help to build collaborative community relationships. That means that we are engaged with community partners who are supporting families and students through the educational process. And then we also provide information and training about available service options and delivery systems for school-age children. Some of my background is that I'm a special education teacher by trade. I was in the classroom for approximately 12 years, and I worked with students with disabilities in a variety of formats. So I worked as a resource room teacher and a consultant teacher, as well as a special class teacher. And I have experience with students who were preschool age all the way up through high school age. So I have a variety of experiences, both in New York State and in Nevada. So a couple of different settings as well. I am going to let Laura, my colleague, introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Hurwitz, and I work with Jen in the School Age Family and Community Engagement Center as the Resource and Referral Specialist. I just started my third year of BOCES, and prior to being a part of the School Age Faith Center, I worked under the previous contract for the Regional Early Childhood Direction Center. My current role gives me the opportunity to participate in various community partnerships and interagency groups focused on improving outcomes for students with disabilities and their families. I also work as part of the larger regional team to help educational organizations such as school districts, non-district programs, and community partners to engage families in the special education process and to build bridges between home and educational environments. Over my 20 years as an educator, I have worked for an early intervention and preschool special education agency. I have taught in a kindergarten through second grade 811 special class, a kindergarten special class setting for students with a wide range of needs, a preschool special education classroom, and a general education pre-kindergarten. I have a background of working with students with a higher level of need, including those with significant medical needs. I'm so glad you're all here with us today and were able to join us for this important learning opportunity. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you. Okay, so I have changed my mind. I'm being a little fickle. I apologize. I am going to do one slide at a time because it's a much cleaner look. So let's look quickly at our agenda for our time together. So we're going to look at the credit requirements for graduation. We'll take some time and look at the pathways to a Regents or a local diploma. We'll spend a little time on the appeal, eligibility, and criteria, the safety net options for our students with disabilities, as well as the non-diploma exiting credentials. And throughout all of this, we're going to look at the updates due to the school closures due to COVID-19. So first off, what I'd like you to know is that if you are a parent of a student with a disability, or you're working with a family that has a student with a disability, something they need to know at their annual review is that during your annual review through your students' high school years, there should be a discussion with the parents on the graduation requirements that apply to your student, how your student is progressing toward a diploma, any of the appeals, safety nets, and superintendent determination pathway options that are available for the student should be discussed. And this is each year, so that as a family and a committee on special education, everybody is informed about how the student is progressing and the requirements that they need to meet in order to earn a diploma or either of the non-diploma credential options that they are working toward. This information should be discussed as well as provided in written information. So just know that right off the bat, this is something that you should be talking about each year with your school district. So know that there is a lot of information that I'm going to share with you today. I will provide some time for some questions and answers. And know that Laura and I are available if you have further questions after you have heard the information that we're going to share today. So we're going to start with the credit requirements for a student to earn a diploma in New York State. So the credit requirements are a minimum requirement of 22 by the end of your student's high school career. They are in a prescribed manner, meaning that they have to be in specific areas. So for example, on this blue chart, you'll see that they have to have 4 English credits. That means they're typically taking 1 English course each year that is a credit-bearing course. They have to have 4 social studies credits, 3 science, 3 math, 1 in languages other than English, 1 in the arts, 2 in physical education, a half of a credit in health, and then 3.5 credits are electives, meaning your student has some choice about how they want to fulfill those 3.5 credits. I'd like you to look back up at the social studies because they are prescribed courses that are available through high school. So the way your student will earn their 4 social studies credits is 1 credit is in US history, 2 credits would be in global history and geography, a half of a credit in participation in government, and a half of a credit in economics. Know that your school district has already laid out how these courses will look and when these courses will be taken. So in 9th grade, they've already determined that, usually a student will be taking global history. In 10th grade, they'll take their 2nd credit in global history. In 11th grade, they'll take US history. And then in 12th grade, they take their participation in government and economics. So know that your school district has already looked at the credits that are required, and they have created an outline as to how your student will earn those. In science, there's another specific distribution. So your student has to have 1 life science and 1 physical science at least. And then their 3rd credit in science can be either a life science or a physical science. Language other than English, you'll notice, has 2 asterisks near it, meaning that a student with a disability could be excused from the required credit in language other than English. So this is determined by the CSE typically, and it is noted on your student's IEP as to whether or not they are exempt from that language other than English. If your student is exempt from language other than English, they still must earn the 22 credits. So they'll have to make up that 1 credit in another course. Typically it's another elective. But again, that's something that you'll have to have a conversation with your district about. Please know that all of the requirements I'm speaking to are put out, these are the minimum requirements put out by New York State Education Department. Your district could have additional requirements that they have deemed a must for your student. And so that's something you'll also have to have a conversation with your district about. Through there, you could look at their Board of Education requirements, or you can have conversation with your student's school counselor. But make sure that you know what your school's requirements are, as well as what the New York State Ed requirements are. So we're going to talk next about how the closure due to COVID-19 impacted your student earning credits. Here we are. There we go. So the question was, how will students earn credit in interrupted courses without completing the unit of study requirements? And the answer to that is that a student should be granted credit as long as the student has met the standards assessed in the provided coursework. So when our schools were closed due to COVID-19, we went to remote learning, whether it was online or maybe your district provided packets and that type of schoolwork. It might have been more paper pencil. As long as your student engaged in the assignments required and they engaged in the work and they met the grading requirements set by the district, your student should then be earning the credit. So it was very important that your student stayed engaged in school, completed the work, and met those grading requirements. So if they did that, they would still earn the credits needed toward graduation. The second part that a student needs to work toward to earn their diploma is the assessment requirements. So they're working on earning their 22 credits throughout their high school years. They must also work on their assessment requirements. The minimum for New York State Ed, or that New York State Ed put forth, was that each student must pass 4 required assessments, and these are the Regents exams. So they must pass 1 in math, 1 in English, 1 in science, and 1 in social studies. For math, science, and social studies, there are more than 1 assessments that the student could engage in. So for example, a student who is in their algebra math class, at the end of that algebra math class, they're typically offered the Algebra Regents exam. If they're engaged in geometry, at the end of that course, they would be offered the Geometry Regents. So there are a few different assessments that the student could engage in math, science, and social studies. In English, there is only 1 assessment. That assessment is typically given at the end of the student's junior year. Some districts, however, might provide it in January of their junior year as, you know, a way to earn or to complete that assessment a little bit earlier. Along with those 4 assessments, the student has a 5th assessment, or a +1 pathway assessment. So this could be a 5th Regents exam in math, science, or social studies, or they could be taking other pathway assessments that are available through your district. In the resources that you are given in at the end of this PowerPoint, there is a list of assessments that have been approved by the New York State Education Department that your district may have access to. So the pathway assessments could be in STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It could be in a humanities or an arts. They could also be engaged in a language other than English assessment, a career and technical education assessment, or they could be working toward the CDOS Commencement Credential as their +1 assessment. So again, there are 4 Regents exams, 1 in math, 1 in English, 1 science, and 1 social studies, and then a 5th assessment requirement. I will tell you that typically a student has access to more than just 5 assessments, just by nature of the way the school district maps out all of their courses and their assessments. So your student may have the opportunity to engage in more than 5 assessments. This is the minimum requirement though. So let's look at how COVID-19 has impacted the assessments. Oh, there we go. So here's the question. The question was, or the question is around students who would have taken Regents exams this June are exempt from the diploma requirement provided they meet one of the following eligibility requirements. So you might remember that State Ed had announced that the Regents exams would not be held this year, that students would not be engaging in those exams. Your student has some eligibility requirements that they must meet. So if a student was currently enrolled in a course culminating in a Regents exam and they earn the course credit, then they would be eligible for the exemption for the exam. So for example, if I was a junior, I was finishing my ELA course, I earned the credit, the Regents exam is now canceled, if you will, so I would be exempt from taking that exam. And I will be given a pass for that exam. The other piece of eligibility, or another way to be eligible, is if the student is currently enrolled in the course that culminates in a Regents exam, but they failed to earn the credit by June of 2020. They then decide that they are going to utilize some summer instruction and they are granted credit in August. So they still have some time. You know, they have until August to earn that credit. They could then be exempt from taking the exam. Or a student has previously earned the credit in the course culminating in the Regents exam, and they did not yet pass the exam, but they were intending to take the exam again this June. So for example, I'm a student who I have passed my English courses previously. So I'm a senior this year. Last year I took the English exam. I did not pass the English Regents exam, but I was intending to take it again this June. Then I would be exempt from having to take that exam this June. So you'll have to have a pretty good idea of where your student stands in terms of their course credit and their engagement in that course. For those who had previously earned the credit, right? So that's that last example I just gave. I'm a senior this year. I had passed my ELA course, but I did not yet pass my exam, and I was intending to take the exam in June. These are some examples of how we would know that a student was intending to take a Regents exam. So it could be that the student actually had conversation with somebody in the district and they informed the school that they wish to take the exam, to retake the exam this June. It could be that the student was preparing to take the exam by receiving some academic intervention or some supplemental instruction to prepare them to take the exam, and they had been engaged in that this year. Or that the student excuse me, had decided that they were going to try to better their score. So they took the exam in June of 2019 or August of 2019 or January of 2020, and we're going to make an attempt to pass or better their exam score. They would also be somebody who is exempt from the exam. So there are multiple ways that we can show that a student was intending to take the exam this June. Once again, this is why it's really important to be in constant conversation with your district about where your student is toward their graduation requirements. So remember, I talked about other pathway assessments that are available for students. So there is some guidance on how the pathway assessments are being exempt. So if I was a student who was planning to use a pathway assessment, meaning it wasn't a Regents exam, it was another exam, maybe something in the career and technical education type courses that I needed to take. Here's how the exemption would work. The student needs to be currently enrolled in the course leading to that pathway assessment and earn the credit by the end of this school year, 2019-20 school year. Or the student was previously enrolled in a course leading to the +1 pathway assessment, and they had earned the course credit but hadn't yet passed the assessment, and they were intending to take the test this June. They would qualify. Or a student is currently or was previously identified as an English language learner, and their home language is Chinese, French, Italian, Korean, or Spanish, or deemed qualified by the principal, and they were intending to take the language other than English +1 assessment in June of 2020, or there's one more. State Ed really tried to make sure they covered all their bases. Or the student was deemed qualified by the principal in the use of American Sign Language, intending to take the language other than English +1 American Sign Language assessment in June of 2020. So there are multiple ways that the student can qualify to be eligible for that pathway assessment exemption. So actually, I'm going to pause for a minute here and just review. In order to earn a diploma, your student needs to be engaged in a few things. They are working toward credits, a minimum of 22 in a prescribed manner by SED, the State Education Department. They are also working toward assessment requirements, 4 required Regents exams, 1 in each of the core areas, math, English, science, and social studies, and then a +1 assessment, which is either another Regents exam, an approved pathway assessment, or the CDOS Commencement Credential. So I'm going to talk to you now a little bit about the CDOS Commencement Credential. The CDOS Commencement Credential has 2 roles. One is that it can assist a student in earning a local or a Regents diploma. In this scenario, the student would still earn the 22 units of credit as prescribed, and they would have to still pass the 4 Regents assessments that are required. Again, 1 in each of the core areas. Then if they successfully complete the requirements for the CDOS Commencement Credential, that would assist them in earning a diploma. The other way the CDOS Credential supports students is by being a standalone Commencement Credential. So that means the student has engaged in earning the 22 credits and passing the assessments, but for whatever reason was unsuccessful in completing those requirements. They were, however, successful in completing the CDOS Commencement Credential requirements. They could earn the CDOS Commencement Credential as a standalone credential. As a standalone, it is important to know that it is not necessarily seen as equivalent to a diploma. What the CDOS Commencement Credential does is says that the student has entry-level employability skills, which is important to know because when the student is entering into that workforce, it's important that they have some of those work skills in order to obtain and maintain employment. So there are 2 ways that the student can earn the CDOS Commencement Credential. The first is listed here on this slide. So the first is that the student has to meet a few requirements. They would be working on and updating a career plan. This is not an activity that they would engage in on their own. This is an activity that they would work on with somebody who is familiar with the student. The career plan would document their career aspirations, any coursework that they have completed that would help support their career goal, and then any other activities that the student would like to engage in and actually engages in that help support them attaining their career goal. This could be things like volunteer experiences, work-based learning experiences, research, interviewing other professionals in the field. Any of those types of activities would be documented on the career plan. These activities could be either completed through their school or through their educational system, or or they can be done independently. The second requirement for this option is that the student has 1 completed employability profile within a year prior to the student exiting school. This again is not completed by the student. This is completed by somebody who is familiar with the student's work skills. It is documentation of the student's entry-level employability skills. Things like showing up on time, being able to take instruction, working as a team. All of those types of skills are documented on the employability profile. The third requirement is that the student must demonstrate achievement of the CDOS learning standards. So this is done again in a variety of manners, through coursework, through work-based learning, through volunteering. All of those ways the student can demonstrate that they do have an achievement of the CDOS learning standards. And the last piece that a student must complete is 216 hours of career and technical education coursework and or work-based learning experiences. If your student is working on career and technical education coursework, that could be something in the fields of, for example, culinary or business, or something in, auto body or auto mechanics. There's a variety of career and technical education coursework opportunities that your student could be engaged in. If they're working on coursework, they must have a minimum of 54 hours of work-based learning experiences along with that coursework. It could be embedded in the coursework, or it could be separate. If your student is choosing not to utilize any career and technical education coursework, they can do all 216 hours in work-based learning experiences. And maybe they're a student who just learns better and enjoys being a hands-on learner. They want to be in the work environment and learning that way. They can certainly engage in the requirements for the CDOS Commencement Credential that way. So that's option 1 of the CDOS Commencement Credential. Or a student can earn the CDOS Commencement Credential through option 2. This means that they have met the requirements for one of the department-approved pathway assessments in CDOS. CDOS, I don't know if I've already said this, but CDOS is Career Development and Occupational Studies. You'll see below that there are 5 different assessments that a student could engage in and pass. And if they do that, they are able to earn the CDOS Commencement Credential. So you'll see option 1 is great for those students who want the hands-on experience. They're not necessarily interested in taking another assessment. They want to be fully immersed in learning those career development and occupational studies skills. That's option 1. Option 2, the student says, you know what, I think I would rather, go for an assessment. I can learn some of the coursework that way and then take the assessment. That's where I see my talents. Then they can utilize option 2. You'll notice there's lots of options for our students in earning their diploma. So of course, COVID-19 did impact the CDOS credential as well. So here's some guidance regarding how we had to, look at the CDOS credential through the eyes of COVID-19. So the student who is graduating this year, 2019-20, may be granted the CDOS Commencement Credential without completing all of the requirements if the school principal, in consultation with relevant faculty, determine that the student has otherwise demonstrated knowledge and skills in the CDOS learning standard. So they're still having to show that they did, learn those CDOS learning standards. This can still fulfill the +1 pathway, which is actually really great news. And it can be used to meet the requirements for the Superintendent Determination of a local diploma. And we will be talking about that. We haven't discussed that safety net option yet, but know that this can still be used toward that. If you have a student who is continuing their high school education and they were supposed to complete some of the requirements for the CDOS credential this year, and were unable to do that because of the closure, those requirements that they were going to complete this year can be exempted. They would still have to fulfill any requirements scheduled or planned for subsequent years. So maybe next year they were going to complete another set of requirements for the CDOS credential. They would still have to do that. It's this year's requirements that would be exempt. So there's some flexibility again for our students regarding the CDOS credential and the COVID-19 school closures. This one is really important, the parental right to decline examination waiver. So I keep saying that our students are exempt from Regents exams that they were supposed to engage in this year. They were also exempt from finishing some of the CDOS commencement credential requirements. What the New York State Education Department has done here is made sure that families and students are engaged in conversation around these exemptions. So they did not want to take away the rights of the parents and students, or parents and families, to have conversation and to be a part of the decision-making regarding those exemptions. So as a family, as a parent, you have the right to say, we are declining the exemption of the exams and the CDOS credential. So the declination of exemption works for the Regents exams, any of the State Education Department approved alternative exams, any of the other pathway assessments, or the unfinished CDOS commencement credential requirements. If these exemptions are declined, a diploma will not be conferred at this time, and the child will not be eligible to graduate until he or she meets all of those graduation assessment requirements. So I want you to just be very aware of what this means. If you do decline the exemptions, also know that these are irrevocable, meaning that once it's done, it's done. There are no takebacks, if you will, right? So the wonderful part is that families are a part of this conversation. They're a part of the next steps of the student's educational career or life beyond school, and that, you know, there should be conversation happening regarding how your student is finishing out their high school career. This notice has to be sent to you as a parent a minimum of 10 calendar days prior to the date on which a student shall receive a diploma. All school districts right now are different in terms of when they're ending school and when they're actually awarding diplomas. So you'll have to know those dates from your school. But your school must make multiple attempts to get this notification to you by mail, by email, by text. And that all students who are scheduled to graduate in June or August of 2020 have been exempted from a graduation assessment requirement. That's who needs to receive these notifications. So a student with a disability who is now eligible to receive a diploma due to the exemptions that were previously planning to continue their education programming must have documentation of successful notification and parental desire for the student to receive a diploma. The other thing they would be receiving is prior written notice, PWN, that is stating that the FAPE, or free appropriate public education, would be ending. So let me give you a small scenario on what this might mean, or how this could look for a student. We have a student who is a student with a disability, and the Committee on Special Education had decided that this student was going to take more than 4 years to graduate high school because they are going to engage in some transition work. So maybe they're going to be a part of a program like Project Search. They've completed their credit requirements, and because of these Regents exemptions, they would be eligible to graduate right now. If that graduation went forward and they received a diploma, they would no longer be eligible to attend the Project Search program. If the families that received this notice and they declined the exemption, then that student could stay in school and attend the Project Search programming. And in order to earn a diploma, they would still need to be successful in completing those assessments that were going to be offered this year. So you really need to understand what your students' programming looked like. What was the plan? Were you planning on further transition activity? And if you were through the school district, you may have to be one of the families that declines the exemptions. If, however, you've determined, you know what, nope, they're ready, we don't need to go forward with the transition programming that we had initially thought would be good, we want the exemptions to stand, then your student could earn their diploma, and they could then engage in other activities as a high school graduate. Maybe obtain a career position, if you will, or maybe they want to go into the military, or they're going to go to college. So please make sure you understand what the declination means. And if you have questions, Laura and I are available to help you work through these scenarios. Okay, Laura, can I stop for a moment and see if there's any questions regarding that information? That was, I mean, this is a meaty webinar, so are there any questions?
Well, there's been questions coming in, so let me pull out. Okay, so here's one. What would a certificate of completion in a program such as cosmetology EMT count as a +1?
As a pathway, my first answer is yes. You have to make sure though that they have completed all of the requirements for that CTE program. So that is a conversation to have with your school district. Make sure that those requirements that were inherent in that career and technical education program meet the requirements for that +1 pathway.
Okay.
So I can't say an automatic yes because I don't have all of the details.
Okay, so I have another question. Can
Okay.
parents decline exemptions in one exam / or credential and not in another?
Yes. Yes. So when that letter is sent out regarding the declinations, it should have each exam listed or credential that the student would be eligible for an exemption in, and then the parent and family can pick and choose if they want to do it that way. Yes.
Great. And the next one is in regards to the CDOS certificate. Did you say a student can work on their own? If the student does the work on their own, how do they monitor it?
That's a really great question. So yes, they certainly could, in their spare time, go and do activities or engage in activities that would help them earn or help them learn about their career field. Could they work on their own? Yes, certainly. You need to make sure, though, if it's going to count for the CDOS credential, that there is conversation with the school district and that there is agreement and oversight with the school district on some of that work. So working on the CDOS credential does not preclude the student from obtaining their own part-time job if they want to do that.
Jen, this is Laura. Would that be an opportunity also for families to talk with districts about whether a digital portfolio or something similar would be an appropriate option to help document that?
It would, yes. There are multiple ways that, you know, earning or working toward the requirements of the CDOS credential can happen. Again, this is where it's really important to have conversation with school districts, because each school district has implemented the CDOS credential in a slightly different way. So having conversation with your school counselor, your special education teacher, whomever it is that's helping manage your student's program is essential when you're considering the requirements for a diploma. Any
Great.
other ones in there, Laura?
Not for the CDOS, but so, but we have other questions as well.
Okay. Do we want to tackle those, or you want me to finish the safety net options?
Why don't you go ahead and finish, because that could also pop up some more questions as well.
Okay, that's
Great.
a really good point. Okay, so we will talk about the safety net options for students with disabilities right now. So these safety net options would be for students who have a current IEP, so a current individualized education program, or a student with a 504 plan, and the use of the safety net options is documented on the 504 plan, or a student who is declassified in grade 8 or after, and it was documented on their declassification plan. They would then, all of those groups of students have access to these safety net options. There are two of them. One of them is the low pass option. The other is the compensatory option. The low pass option simply means that a passing score on an assessment, so one of those required exiting assessments, is a 55 or better. They do have an appeal available, and we'll discuss this a little bit more, but they do have an appeal available to them as well. If they take the exam twice and one of the scores is a 52 to a 54, then that student could appeal that score and request that it be considered a pass. The compensatory option gets a little more involved. So the compensatory option involves multiple assessments, meaning that a student who has scored a 65 or better on an assessment could compensate a low score of 45 to a 54 on another assessment. So for example, I'm a student who has a relative strength in ELA, and I score a 65 on my ELA exam. Science, however, is not really my thing. I didn't do so well. I got a 45 on my exam. The good news is that my 65 in my ELA assessment compensates for my 45 on my science assessment, and both are considered a pass. So that one is one that we have to do a little more watching of scores for. So I spoke briefly about the appeals in terms of the low pass appeal, but there is an appeal that's available for all students. So all students who are taking Regents exams have eligibility for a Regents appeal. So what has to happen in order to meet the requirements is that a student must have taken the Regents exam twice, and within one of those times, they scored a 60 to a 64. Then the student would, or we would also look to see if the student took advantage of some academic help provided by the school in some way, shape, or form for that exam that is under appeal. And we also have to look to see if the student passed the course for which the appeal is being sought. So if they meet those requirements, that student could be recommended for an exemption to the graduation requirement of earning a 65 or better, which is good news, right? So a student could do this for up to 2 different exams. The second appeal is the one for students with disabilities seeking a local diploma. So that was that low pass appeal I spoke of, where they scored a 52 to a 54, they could also ask for an appeal, provided they meet the other requirements. So they have taken the exam twice, they've received some academic help for that course, they passed the course, then they can request that appeal. And then the last one is the English language learners seeking an appeal for an ELA exam only. If they scored a 55 to a 59 on their ELA exam, having taken it twice, having taken advantage of academic support for ELA and passing the course, they could also ask for that score to be appealed. And know that there is some mixing and matching of these appeals as well. So when you think about being the child's school counselor, they have a lot to watch for our students, but it's nice that they do have all of these different options. So that's the appeals. Again, just a reminder, this low pass option means that a student earned a 55 or better on their Regents exams. If they did, they are eligible for a local diploma utilizing this low pass safety net option. And then another reminder about the compensatory option, that means that the student utilized a 65 to compensate for a 45 to a 54, and those were both considered a pass. Okay. Let's talk about the superintendent's determination for a local diploma. So in order to be eligible for this safety net option, the student must be a student with a disability receiving special education services, meaning they have a current IEP. A student who has a 504 or a declassified student is not eligible for the superintendent's determination. The student must be participating in and passing all of their relevant Regents level coursework. And they should also be actively participating in their required Regents examination. They may not be passing them, but they need to be engaged in taking them. And the student has earned the appropriate 22 units of credit. So they have to be engaged in the right coursework, if you will. If they have met all of those requirements, the student's parent or the person in the parental relations submits in writing a request to the superintendent for a determination of a local diploma. Then the superintendent would be looking at the student's information, so all of their coursework and any other information that the student or that the superintendent has to determine that they would be eligible to be awarded a local diploma through the superintendent's determination. There are two pieces that we need to look at when it comes to the assessment portion for the superintendent's determination. There are some students who would request this only for science and social studies, which means that they were successful in appealing or passing with a 55 the ELA and math Regents exams. Or there are those students who assessments just are not their thing. They don't do very well on them. They haven't passed any of their Regents exams. However, they have completed the requirements for the CDOS Commencement Credential, as well as their credits. They can then be awarded a local diploma through the superintendent's determination option, which is actually exciting for many of our students who find that the Regents exams are a barrier to them earning a diploma. So of course, COVID-19 comes into play here as well. All of the safety net options remain in effect and must be considered still for our students. For the purposes of diploma determination, the exempted exams are considered to be a score of a 65. However, the transcript would not reflect a score for any of these exempted exams. There is guidance coming to school districts about how they'll denote the exemption, but it would not be through that numeric 65. We talked about the compensatory safety net option, where a 65 would compensate for a 45. The 65 on an exempted exam would not be one that they could use to compensate for a low score of 45. So just keep that in mind. While it's considered a pass, it's not considered something that can be used to be a part of the compensatory safety net option. Okay, so that's all there is about the safety net options and the earning of a diploma. So I'm going to stop here for a moment again, Laura. Were there any other questions about the diploma portion of it?
Yes. Well, okay. So one of them is I'm kind of reading through these as we go and deciding is this a good end of the time question or no. This is a great question. If my child is over 18, can they request a superintendent's determination on their own?
No, that's a great question. Oh, excuse me. That's a great question. We do not recognize the age of majority in New York. So they are not able to do that, even if they are over the age of 18 or between the ages of 18 and 21, they are not able to. So they'll need a parent to do that for them.
Okay. And that may be a really great lead into learning how to advocate, working with a family member and you know, kind of going it in as a partnership to talk about how to advocate, self-advocates, so to speak. Great.
And how to use your resources, right? So the parent becomes a resource for them. So I agree. That was a great question. Thank you for whoever asked that.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think for that section, we're done with the questions that pertain to that section.
Okay. Then we'll go on to the Skills and Achievement Commencement Credential. And this is a credential that is available to students with disabilities who are assessed using the New York State Alternate Assessment, or NYSA. You might hear it called, you know, NYSA. What this Skills and Achievement Commencement Credential does is that it documents the students' levels of independence and skills that would be needed for post-school living, earning, and working. If a student is in the New York State Alternate Assessment, I can't say this as a complete definitive, but typically, if they're in the New York State Alternate Assessment, that means that they are not taking Regents level courses to earn credit, and they're also not engaging in the Regents assessments. They are working toward the Skills and Achievement Commencement Credential. They would be engaged in learning around those three pieces, so post-school learning, earning, and their work skills. There are, however, few instances where we see a student that has a relative strength in one area and they're able to engage in the Regents level coursework, they're able to engage in the assessments. And then on the other hand, they have significant deficits that do not enable them to engage in coursework or assessments at the Regents level for other subjects. So sometimes, doesn't happen often, but sometimes we have a child who's in both the Regents coursework and the New York State Alternate Assessment coursework. In this instance, if they're in both, they still cannot earn a Regents diploma because they are not, they're not completing all of the requirements for the diploma. So they would still be exiting with a Skills and Achievement Commencement Credential or the CDOS credential. A student who is earning the Skills and Achievement Commencement Credential must have completed 12 years of schooling, excluding kindergarten, and they would have completed school until about the age of 21. And know that this work is also aligned with the New York State learning standards. So they are still engaging with the learning standards that have been set forth by New York State. This is an example of a part of the student exit summary that a student leaving with the Skills and Achievement Commencement Credential would have. You'll see at the top, there are the levels of independence. It's a 1 to 5 rating scale, and it helps the receiver of this information understand the student's level of independence in multiple work skills. Excuse me. So that if I, am an employer and I receive this information about an individual, I can look at this and say, okay, I can expect them to be relatively independent with this portion of skills, but then not with, other skills that are going to be required for employment. So it's good information to have. I know that there was a question prior to this webinar that asked about the difference between New York State alternate assessment and Regents coursework. And really the difference is if a student is in the New York State alternate assessment, they are not earning a diploma. They're not engaging in the work to earn a diploma. They are engaging in work that would help them become as independent as possible in their living, learning, and earning. And I hope that answered that initial question that came out. Were there other questions about the Skills and Achievement Commencement Credential, Laura?
No, not so far.
Okay. Well, that's all I have about the Skills and Achievement Commencement Credential. That one was a little bit more brief because it wasn't as affected as the Regents coursework for a diploma. So you'll also find in your PowerPoint these resources, and what these resources will do will give you some more background about the information that I provided throughout this webinar. So there are actually 2 slides worth of information on all of those things. One quick reminder that I would give you is that it's really important to have conversation with your school district as well as your student to make sure that everybody is on the same page. Again, if you have further questions that were not answered, or you have questions, after you've been thinking about this information, please know that Laura and I are available to answer some of your questions. And if we are not, we will help you find the resources that certainly can. And so I'd like to thank you all for being a part of this. I know it was a ton of information. I appreciate, that you were engaged in this. And again, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to either of us. I don't know, Laura, if you want to do any of the questions that were left over.
Yeah, great. We have several. If you're ready, the first one is
I'm ready.
In regards to ELL students. It says, what if an ELL student speaks a language at home other than one of the 5 that you had listed?
So in that case, your principal would have the ability to deem that student eligible for any of the exemptions. So that's a conversation to have with your principal.
Great, thank you.
So it doesn't have to be one of those 5. You're welcome.
The next one, and great question, will my child be able to go to college besides community college with just a local diploma?
Absolutely. Oh, I love that question. Thank you for whoever asked that. We always say in our office, the difference between a Regents and a local diploma is that you live in New York. So only New York understands that, or it doesn't even understand, but knows that there's 2 different types of diplomas. I myself am a graduate of high school with a local diploma. So please know that your student can go to any college They can apply to any college, and actually any college outside of New York State won't even understand the difference in the diplomas, or that there is a difference.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
The next one is, how can I get, or how do you get an exemption from the language? They're saying their child has a learning disability.
So that is something that you would talk about at the Committee of Special Education meeting. So the annual review. If you and your student are feeling like that is a requirement that is going to be too strenuous, and it's not necessarily something that you feel the student would be successful in, that's a conversation to have with the Committee on Special Education, the CSE. So thank you, that's another great question.
Thank you. The next one is that their child failed English 11 this year, but they don't feel that they would be able to do the online learning this summer. They're looking for, do you have any suggestions about having to double up next year, or any suggestions for the family?
So that's a good question as well. So what you'll need to do is talk to your district about credit recovery. Is there another way that the student could recover that credit next year? Are they able, so does your school have the structure ability to allow that student to take 2 English courses? And if they do, they would definitely have to double up, or they would have to engage in some credit recovery.
Great, thanks.
For sorry, Laura, the only other thing they could do potentially is take summer school next year to earn that credit as well.
Great.
Hopefully in person.
So the next one is, someone's asking if you have, or if you have knowledge of, or can you touch on any, they're hearing that New York State is looking at potentially revamping the exit credentials or graduation requirements. Is there any information that you have or knowledge that you could share?
I wish I had more information. The only thing I know is that they have created, I'll call it a task force, because I don't know the verbiage that they used off the top of my head, but they are convening a group that is looking at how to change the requirements. Is it that we need to do away with the Regents exams, or is it that we just need to alter the way that they are accessed by our students? They don't have anything further yet, but they are investigating potential changes to it. And I don't have anything new as of right now.
Thank you so much. Jennifer and Laura, I'm wondering, we had a couple questions in regards to can people reach out and call you, or can you go to a meeting? And I'm wondering if you could share how your role and how you work with families with everyone.
Sure. So, and Laura, jump in if you think I'm not explaining something well, or if you have more information that you think needs to be heard. So right now, we are not necessarily a resource that would attend a meeting with you, but we would certainly be engaged with you in how to prepare for it, helping you to learn other resources and requirements that are deemed to need to take place by the state ed department. We could also help you in working with your district. So working with both you and your district, we could help be, that connector, if you will, so that moving forward, that relationship is one that is open and, free-flowing communication could happen. I don't know if Laura, if you want to add anything, Laura Hurwitz.
I think you mostly covered it. I think the other piece is just remembering that part of our role is to help make those connections between all of the various pieces of support that may be available for a student. And sometimes that's helping with making connections for districts, with families, around community organizations, those types of things. So pretty much if you have a question or a need, if you reach out to us, the response is different to every individual need. So it's sometimes hard to try to capture everything that we do, but certainly reach out if you have a need, and we will absolutely do our best to be able to support you.
Right. And then we do work in partnership with the folks at Starbridge. So Laura Arrington and I and Laura Hurwitz all work closely. So the nice part is that we can work through our relationship to help support you in whatever way, you know, you need to be supported.
Great, thank you. We had another question come in. How does a parent make a decision when it is the best time to decide their child is going to go into regular or alternative assessment, especially for a child who's in middle school? So it looks like, you know, what path will they decide to go on?
That's a really good question. And obviously we don't have all of the information about your child or about the child in question. What I would say though is that it's clear you're not making, you know, this decision lightly, that you're really trying to consider all of the information. I guess in my experience, what I would suggest is that maybe give the child an opportunity to be in those Regents level courses, to see how are they going to do in those courses. You know, we never know what a student is going to do through maturity, you know, and how much they're going to grow in their high school years. So if you can start them in the 9th grade and looking and being a part of those Regents courses, attempting the coursework, attempting the Regents exams, and maybe what has to happen is that the Committee on Special Education makes the decision that graduation might not happen in 4 years, but it could happen in 5 or 6 years. And so we're going to give the student all opportunities available to earn that diploma. Go ahead.
If I can just add into, I think that's just another nice reminder to make sure that you're working with your Committee on Special Education to make sure that your child or student's IEP is truly reflective of his or her needs, and it's well structured to be able to provide them the supports that they may need to have those opportunities. So that's just something else to keep in mind.
It's true, making sure that the program that has been put together is going to be supportive of your students' needs. It's hard to go back, if you will. So if a student's in the New York State alternate assessment, and then, you know, the committee decides that they want to have them back into the Regents coursework, it's not something that can't happen, but you just have to consider, you know, the extra work that's going to happen to get them up to speed, if you will. So there's no real clear-cut answer on that.
Thank you so much. It looks like that's it for our questions. Jennifer and Laura, thank you so much. Do you have any final words or?
Just again, if you have questions moving forward, there's so much to consider when we're looking at a student earning a diploma. There's lots of requirements and yet lots of options to, you know, meeting those requirements. So we recognize that it's a heavy lift for lots of us to understand all that has to happen, you know, in a student's high school career. And that communication with your district is of utmost importance when it comes to all of those requirements and making sure your student has the support that they need in doing and achieving those requirements. So thank you again for your attendance. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us.